The Great Smoky Mountains are more than a national park. They're a living archive, a place where fog rolls not just to hide the peaks, but to cover what was left behind. Every trail here has a name, every ridge has a story, and some of them never ended. For over a century, hikers, rangers, and entire search parties have vanished into this wilderness, gone in clear weather, in daylight, just a few steps from help. Files were opened, reports were written, and then closed. Not because the answers were found, but because the questions stopped being asked. The Smokies keep their records differently. You can hear it in the silence before dawn, when the air feels heavier than it should. You can feel it in the soil, rich and cold, a ground that doesn't just grow trees but buries evidence. Officials say these mountains are unpredictable. Locals say they're selective, because once you step past the tree line here, it's not just about where you go. It's about whether the mountains decide you leave. Lock your doors. Put on your headphones. Because after this video, you'll never see the Great Smoky Mountains the same way again. The unsolved death of Thelma Melton. It was supposed to be an easy walk. On September 20th, 1981, 58-year-old Thelma Melton joined two close friends for a light afternoon hike along the familiar Deep Creek Trail. Thelma knew the route by heart. She had walked it for years, every summer, like a ritual. The weather was clear, the terrain gentle. Nothing about that day suggested danger. Around 4:20 p.m., the group began ascending a mild incline near the loop's crest. Witnesses say Thelma was smiling, chatting, a few steps ahead of the others. Then, in a blink, she disappeared. No scream, no sound of slipping, just gone, like the trees had closed around her. Her friends searched for nearly an hour before alerting rangers. Within 2 hours, the park initiated a full-scale operation, dogs, helicopters, and more than 100 volunteers combing the area. The scent dogs caught her trail once, and then lost it mid-path, where the dirt turned smooth and undisturbed, as if nothing had ever passed through. The search lasted days. Teams moved outward in grids, covering every possible exit. No signs of struggle, no tracks, no personal belongings. Rangers even checked nearby motels and roads in case Thelma had become disoriented. But she never surfaced. Her husband confirmed she carried no identification, no money, no medication, just a smile, a bottle of water, and a routine walk that should have lasted less than an hour. By the second week, the dogs refused to re-enter the woods. One handler described them as spooked by something invisible. The final report listed her as presumed deceased, though no body was ever found. The case faded quietly into park history, but over the years the stories grew darker. Campers near Deep Creek began reporting faint cries echoing from the woods around dusk. A woman's voice, repeating a single word that no one could quite make out. Some swore it was home, others help. In 2001, a ranger patrolling after hours saw a figure standing motionless on the trail, a woman in beige, the same outfit Thelma had been wearing. When he blinked, she was gone. His flashlight revealed no tracks in the dirt. Thelma's family never received closure. Her husband passed away years later, believing she had been taken suddenly, not by man, not by accident, but by the mountains themselves. And though the park officially calls it a disappearance, those who hike Deep Creek after sunset still feel it, that subtle pull, like the air tightening around your chest. A reminder that not everyone who enters the Smokies is meant to walk back out, because when someone vanishes without sound, sometimes it's the mountain answering a question no one asked. The Cades Cove Church Light Phenomenon. Cades Cove is one of the most photographed valleys in America, a quiet loop of preserved pioneer cabins, split rail fences, and 3 historic churches. During the day, it's a postcard. But at night, one of those churches comes alive. The primitive Baptist church sits near the old loop road, its white clapboard walls weathered and still. It has been closed since the early 1940s, its doors nailed shut after the congregation disbanded. Yet, beginning in the mid-1950s, rangers and visitors began reporting strange activity. Pale lights flickering inside the windows long after dark. At first it was dismissed as pranksters. Locals would sneak in with lanterns, they said, or headlights from the loop road reflected through the glass. But then came the photographs. In 1959, a tourist's Kodak caught a soft glow inside the sanctuary, not a beam, but a sphere suspended mid-air. When developed, the light reflected on no surface, cast no shadow, and appeared to shine from within the frame itself. By the 70s, The reports were frequent enough that the park installed motion sensors and cameras. The footage showed something unsettling, faint moving illumination that drifted from pew to pew, pausing near the pulpit before vanishing. No doors opened. No heat signatures appeared. One ranger described the footage as light searching for something it can't find. Locals believe the phenomenon began after a small burial relocation effort in 1941. When graves near the church were moved to make room for the new loop road, many of the markers were unnumbered, some lost entirely. It's said that the light follows the names that were never replaced. In 1992, a storm damaged one of the church's shutters, allowing a small view inside. A park maintenance worker peered through and saw the glow in real time. He described it as liquid light, like candle flame without air. When he returned the next morning, the interior walls were scorched in a pattern that resembled handprints. To this day, the National Park Service denies paranormal activity, citing atmospheric refraction and residual heat from humidity changes. But photographers who've captured the event know better. The light doesn't flare randomly. It moves with intent. Sometimes it aligns perfectly with the pews, as if pacing the same route every night, retracing a service that never ended. And though the church remains sealed, those who walk the loop at dusk can still see it, a soft, steady glow pulsing behind the nailed door. Maybe it's energy, maybe it's memory, or maybe it's what happens when faith refuses to leave. But if the light can still move within the house of the lost, what happens when it steps outside? The Deep Creek Drowning Mystery. The Smoky Mountains have a way of giving things back, sometimes gently, sometimes not at all. In July of 1999, park visitors discovered the body of a 28-year-old man in the Deep Creek River, only a few miles from where Thelma Melton vanished 18 years earlier. The man, identified as Travis Bennett, had been missing for 3 days. He was last seen camping with friends at a site near the creek, a stretch of water shallow enough for wading. He told them he was going for a swim before dinner, and never returned. The current that week was calm. The water was barely chest deep. 3 days later, rangers found his body lodged against a fallen log. At first glance, it seemed accidental. A slip, a hit to the head, an ordinary drowning. But when investigators examined the scene, the details didn't fit. For one, his clothes were neatly folded and placed on the bank as if arranged. Each item was clean, dry, and stacked by size. Pants, shirt, shoes. His watch sat on top, still ticking. Second, the body was found facing upstream, against the current, with no sign of scraping or impact on the rocks. The coroner's report noted an absence of water in the lungs, suggesting he hadn't drowned at all. His official cause of death, undetermined. The park's incident log shows that searchers initially covered that same section of creek twice before finding him. Both times, there had been nothing there. One ranger described it quietly years later. He wasn't there, and then he was. The case attracted brief local attention before fading into the background noise of wilderness accidents. But those who've read the full file know the oddest detail wasn't the position of the body. It was the river itself. That week, sensors installed downstream recorded a momentary reversal of flow pressure during the window Bennett went missing. For 31 seconds, the creek's movement slowed, paused, and briefly surged backward. The anomaly was never explained. Today, the Deep Creek Trail remains open. Families swim there every summer, right near the bend where Bennett was found. And sometimes, when the water is still, people notice something unusual. The sound of splashing. Rhythmic, deliberate, coming from the upstream shallows where no one is standing. Locals say it's just the current catching on hidden stones, but those who've heard it know better. It doesn't sound like water hitting rock. It sounds like footsteps, and if the current can turn against itself, what else in these mountains might decide to change direction? The Tremont Voices recording. By 2013, the Great Smoky Mountains had become one of the most acoustically studied parks in America. The National Park Service had installed dozens of remote sensors across Tremont, a dense, quiet valley used to monitor wildlife and sound pollution. For months, the recordings captured only what you'd expect: wind, insects, distant water, until one night in March, at 2:14 a.m., an array of microphones deep in the restricted research zone began transmitting something different: human voices. Not shouting, not conversation, just a low, rhythmic chant. The nearest trail was over 6 miles away. No lights were visible on satellite thermal scans, yet the sound continued for 8 minutes, growing louder and closer before fading abruptly, mid-syllable. When rangers reached the site the next morning, they found no tracks, no equipment, no signs of trespass. The recording was reviewed by the Tremont Institute's research director, Dr. Evan Rhodes, who later described it in an interview as linguistically structured but not identifiable as any known language. Spectrogram analysis showed tonal breaks, similar to human breath patterns, but spread across multiple frequencies, as if several voices were speaking at once in perfect unison. The National Park Service labeled it anomalous interference and archived the file, but copies leaked among sound technicians passed around like contraband. One engineer claimed that when he slowed the track to 1/4 speed, he could hear something beneath the chant, faint like a whisper cutting through a storm. "We are beneath." Skeptics called it pareidolia, the mind finding meaning in noise, but even they struggled to explain why the pitch shifted in harmony with seismic readings taken that same night. A tremor, barely detectable, rippled through the Tremont Valley at precisely 2:14 a.m. The ground vibrated just enough to alter microphone frequency. The chant didn't distort, it followed. After that incident, the park ordered all acoustic sensors in that sector removed. The files were stored under restricted classification and replaced with environmental placeholders. Still, the researchers who worked on the project claim that something changed in the valley afterward. Birdsong patterns altered, coyotes stopped howling near the ridges, and on still nights the echo of voices, faint, almost polite, can be heard when you play white noise near the old sensor sites. Most say it's just interference, feedback from wind tunnels or geological hum. But one former Tremont ranger described it differently. "It doesn't sound like something trying to talk to us. It sounds like something repeating what we already said, from somewhere we can't reach. And if the mountains can record us, what happens when they start replying?" The 1940 Missing Ranger Expedition. The year was 1940, just 6 years after the Smoky Mountains officially became a national park. The roads were still dirt, the cabins still smelled of timber and coal, and rangers were more explorers than bureaucrats, charting territory that had barely been touched since the government took control. That October, a small group of tourists was reported missing near the Forney Ridge area. 3 adults, 2 children, last seen hiking toward Clingman's Dome. When they failed to return, the park assembled a search team of 3 rangers, John Moorfield, Henry Blevins, and their field lead, Joseph Wallace. They left at sunrise. Only one came back. Official reports are scarce. The surviving ranger, Moorfield Fouch, was found 30 hours later, wandering near Noland Creek, dehydrated, incoherent, and barefoot. He couldn't explain how he'd traveled more than 10 miles through dense forest without shoes, food, or light. He spoke of voices in the fog, of seeing lanterns ahead, and of a noise that didn't echo it followed. He was transferred to a veterans hospital in Knoxville and never returned to duty. When interviewed, his statements were fragmented, inconsistent. Yet one phrase appeared in every transcript: "We weren't the ones being followed." The official explanation blamed exhaustion and exposure. The missing tourists were never found, and neither were the other 2 rangers. Their trail markers ended abruptly in a clearing near Forney Creek, where the ground appeared churned as if recently disturbed. In 1976, park archaeologists discovered fragments of canvas, belt buckles, and 2 rusted revolvers at that very site. Serial numbers confirmed one weapon belonged to Ranger Blevins. The find was quietly logged and sealed under historic artifact recovery. No further excavation was permitted. But the strangest detail wasn't the missing men. It was what Moorfield allegedly said on his deathbed decades later. A nurse at the VA hospital in Nashville told local reporters that in his final hours, he began murmuring names, the other rangers, the lost tourists, and then whispered, "They're still walking the ridge." In 2010, a group of backcountry hikers camping near the same region claimed to have heard faint whistles in the mist, a distinct 3-note pattern matching the ranger distress call still used today. When one of them whistled back, the reply came instantly, but from a direction where no one could have stood. The park has never reopened that section for night access. The incident is buried under decades of paperwork, a file so old it barely exists in digital form. Yet sometimes, when the fog thickens along Forney Ridge, rangers on patrol report hearing footsteps pacing just beyond their lantern light, stopping the moment they turn to look. And if the forest can remember the missing, maybe it can keep them walking. The Skeleton Cabin. In the fall of 1976, Two hunters from Bryson City hiked deep into the Smokies near the old Proctor logging site, an area that once held a bustling town before Fontana Lake swallowed it in the 40s. They were tracking deer when they found something else, a small, perfectly intact cabin that didn't appear on any map. The structure sat at the edge of a clearing, half hidden by pine and laurel. Its boards were dry, unweathered, as if built recently, but the architecture looked older than the park itself. The hunters approached cautiously, noting that the air inside the clearing felt heavier, muffled, as though the sound of the forest stopped at the cabin's edge. Inside, dust blanketed every surface except one. On a long wooden table sat a stack of papers, a kerosene lantern, and several small boxes. Each box contained fragments of human bone, tagged, labeled, and numbered in precise handwriting. The papers were maps of the Smoky Mountains, hand-drawn and marked with red circles. Next to them lay a single notebook, open to a page titled, simply, Recovered 14, Unidentified. The hunters left immediately and notified park authorities. Rangers followed the coordinates the next morning, but when they arrived there was nothing. The clearing existed, but the cabin did not. No footprint, no lumber, not even a depression in the grass. The soil was loose, freshly disturbed, as if something had been removed overnight. For months, rumors spread quietly among local rangers. Some said the cabin had been built by an anthropologist conducting private excavation. Others believed it was part of a government operation linked to Cold War mapping projects. But there was no record of any sanctioned work in that area, not in 1976, not ever. Then, a year later, one of the hunters received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph, the cabin, unmistakably the same, but viewed from a different angle. On the back, written in the same neat handwriting seen on the bone tags, were the words, "We only took what the mountain gave back." The photo was turned over to authorities, who logged it and sealed the evidence under unverified material. It has never been made public. In the decades since, hikers exploring near Proctor have reported hearing rhythmic knocking deep in the woods, 3 short taps, a pause, then 3 more, echoing from nowhere and fading before they can be traced. Some claim that the sound matches the old ranger signal for site located. The park has never confirmed a single recovery from that area, but old-timers in Bryson City still talk about it in hushed tones. A cabin that appears only when something lost is ready to be found, and vanishes once it's taken. And if the Smoky Mountains can decide who disappears, maybe they can also decide who comes back. 6 stories, 6 pieces of evidence the mountains were never meant to keep, but did. Thelma Melton, gone between heartbeats on a clear trail. A church that glows from within long after its doors were nailed shut. A man found facing the current, clothes folded, lungs dry. A recording that shouldn't exist. Voices speaking where no one can walk. Rangers who followed the lost and became the memory that followed back. And a cabin that appeared, just long enough to return what the earth had already claimed. Each story ends the same way, not with answers but with silence. Because in the Great Smoky Mountains, silence isn't the absence of sound, it's a choice. The park doesn't bury its secrets in soil. It archives them in air, in stone, in water that never stops moving. And sometimes, if you listen long enough, it feels like the mountains are still taking attendance. 6 mysteries. 6 files left open in the dark. If you made it this far, thank you. Leave a like if one of these stories stayed with you. Tell us which mystery haunts you most, and which mountains we should explore next. But remember, the Smokies don't just hide what's missing. They decide who stays.